The rain hammered against my workshop windows like bullets from heaven, each drop exploding into 1,000 smaller pieces before sliding down the glass in defeat. I sat there in the dim light of my drone studio, staring at my phone, wondering why my wife's wellness retreat was making me feel like I'd swallowed broken glass. Zara had left 3 days ago with her usual theatrical flair, designer luggage, organic smoothie in hand, and enough spiritual bullshit to choke a monk. "I need to find myself, Aiden," she'd said, not looking up from her phone as she spoke. "The mountains are calling." The mountains. Right, because nothing says enlightenment like a 5-star resort in Vermont with room service and a spa that costs more per day than most people make in a week. My name is Aiden Drayven, and I make my living taking pictures from the sky. Commercial drone photography pays the bills and keeps me sane. There's something honest about capturing the world from above, seeing things as they really are instead of how people pretend they are. At 35, I've learned that perspective is everything, especially when your wife is full of shit. The phone buzzed. Zara's name flashed on the screen, but when I answered, all I heard was muffled conversation and laughter. A pocket dial. I should have hung up, but something made me listen. "God, you're terrible." Zara's voice, breathy and playful. A man's voice responded, deep and confident, "You love it when I'm terrible." More laughter, the sound of a bed creaking. Then Zara again, "Damien, stop, someone might hear us." Damien. Not a name I recognized, but then again, Zara collected people like some women collect shoes. The difference was she usually told me about her acquisitions. "Wellness, my ass," I muttered, ending the call. "Unless yoga now involves moaning." I pulled up the drone tracking app on my laptop. Zara didn't know I'd installed it on her phone months ago, a little insurance policy after she'd lost her device 3 times in 6 months, always in the most inconvenient places. The GPS showed her location, Burlington, Vermont, but not at the wellness center she'd mentioned. She was at the Marriott downtown, room 1247. The pieces clicked together like a rifle being loaded. The mysterious girls' trip, with friends she'd never named. The new lingerie she'd bought but never worn for me. The way she'd been working late more often, always with excuses that sounded rehearsed. I sat back in my chair and laughed. Not because it was funny, but because the alternative was putting my fist through the wall. My phone rang again. This time it was Terry, my only real friend in this godforsaken coastal Maine town we called home. "Aiden, you sound like shit," Terry said without preamble. "What's wrong?" "Just discovered my wife's idea of finding herself involves finding someone else's dick." "Ah, hell, I'm sorry, man. You sure? Unless she's practicing some very advanced breathing techniques with a guy named Damien, yeah, I'm sure." Terry was quiet for a moment. Then, "What are you going to do?" I looked out at the rain, at the gray sky that seemed to press down on our little town like a coffin lid. "I'm going to get a drink. Want to meet me at Sanctuary?" "The wine bar in the old church? That pretentious place Zara likes?" "That's the one. I figure if I'm going to drink away my marriage, I might as well do it somewhere with stained glass windows and overpriced Cabernet. I'll be there in 20. I hung up and stared at my reflection in the black computer screen. 35 years old, still in decent shape, despite too many nights hunched over editing software, dark hair that needed cutting, and eyes that had seen too much of the world from above to have many illusions left about what people did when they thought nobody was watching. The drive to Sanctuary took 15 minutes through the winding streets of our picturesque little hell. The wine bar occupied what used to be St. Mary's Episcopal Church, complete with vaulted ceilings, stone arches, and enough atmospheric lighting to make you forget you were drowning your sorrows in a place where people used to pray for salvation. I found a corner table beneath a particularly morose-looking saint and ordered a scotch. The bartender, a kid with more tattoos than sense, looked like he wanted to suggest wine instead but thought better of it when he saw my face. Rough day? He asked, sliding the glass across the table. Rough life, I replied. That's when I saw her. Lyra Ventrix, Zara's closest friend, walking through the door like she owned the place, which, knowing Lyra, she probably did. At 31, she had the kind of beauty that made men stupid and women jealous. Long auburn hair, green eyes that missed nothing, and a smile that could cut glass. She was also the curator at the local art gallery and had never made any secret of the fact that she thought Zara had married beneath herself. She spotted me immediately and glided over with the predatory grace of a shark in designer heels. Aiden, she said, sliding into the seat across from me without invitation. Aren't you supposed to be missing your wife right about now? I took a sip of scotch and studied her face. Aren't you supposed to be on the trip with her? Lyra's smile sharpened. What trip? The wellness retreat, the girls' weekend, the spiritual journey to find inner peace and organic vegetables. Oh, that trip. She signaled the bartender for wine, something expensive, no doubt. I never go on those anymore. Too much drama, not enough actual wellness. So where is she? Lyra leaned back in her chair, her eyes dancing with malicious amusement. She's with her lover. The words hung in the air between us like smoke from a gun barrel. I felt something cold and sharp settle in my chest, but I kept my expression neutral. Years of dealing with difficult clients had taught me how to hide what I was thinking. Her lover, I repeated. Damien Kessler, tech entrepreneur, married, very successful, very married, and very good at making women feel special. She pulled out her phone and started swiping. She's been seeing him for about 3 months now. Started as a business thing. He needed someone to manage partnerships for his new app, but you know how these things go. She turned the phone toward me. Instagram photos that hadn't appeared on my feed, Zara and a man I didn't recognize, both looking far too comfortable with each other. Hotel tags from places she'd never mentioned visiting. Comments from people I'd never heard of. She has you blocked from seeing these, Lyra explained helpfully, but she never blocked me from screenshotting them. I studied the photos with the same detached professionalism I used to analyze aerial shots. The man was handsome in an obvious way. Tall, dark hair, expensive clothes, the kind of smile that sold 1 million products and twice as many lies. In one photo, his hand rested possessively on Zara's lower back. In another, they were sharing what looked like an intimate joke over champagne. "Why are you showing me this?" I asked. Lyra's wine arrived, and she took a delicate sip before answering. Because I'm tired of pretending I don't know. Because she's been lying to everyone, including me. And because... She paused, her green eyes meeting mine. Because I think you deserve better. Better than what? Better than her. She leaned forward, close enough that I could smell her perfume, something expensive and dangerous. Forget her, Aiden. Have dinner with me tonight. The words hit me like a physical blow, not because I was attracted to Lyra, though any man with a pulse would be, but because of what they represented. The final nail in the coffin of my marriage, delivered by my wife's best friend with surgical precision. I looked around the wine bar, at the other patrons nursing their drinks beneath the watchful eyes of stone saints. A few of them were people I recognized, colleagues of Zara's from the marketing firm where she worked, local business owners, the kind of people who made this town's social ecosystem function. "You know what?" I said, loud enough for the nearby tables to hear. "I'd love to have dinner with you." Lyra blinked, clearly not expecting such a quick acceptance. "Really?" "Really." I pulled out my phone and opened the camera. "In fact, let's celebrate right now." Before she could object, I leaned over and snapped a selfie, me and Lyra, her wine glass raised, both of us smiling. I immediately posted it to my social media with a simple caption, "Unexpected evening plans with beautiful company." Within seconds, the likes and comments started rolling in, I tagged 3 of Zara's work colleagues who were sitting at the bar, making sure they'd see it in their notifications. Aiden, Lyra said, her voice uncertain for the first time since she'd sat down. What are you doing? I finished my scotch and stood up. I'm taking your advice. I'm forgetting about my wife. The rain had stopped by the time I walked out of Sanctuary, but the air still carried the promise of more storms to come. Behind me, I could hear the buzz of conversation that always followed a good piece of gossip in a small town. I drove home through streets that suddenly felt different, like I was seeing them for the first time. The house I shared with Zara, a renovated Victorian that had cost us both our savings and most of our sanity, looked smaller somehow, less significant. Inside, I poured another scotch and sat down at my computer. The photo I'd posted with Lyra had already gotten 37 likes and 12 comments, most of them from people who knew both me and Zara. The gossip mill was already grinding. My phone buzzed with a text from Terry. Saw your post? What the hell are you doing? I typed back. Playing chess while everyone else is playing checkers. This is going to get messy. It already is messy. I'm just deciding who gets to clean it up. I opened my laptop and began making a list. Bank accounts to freeze, insurance policies to modify, passwords to change, credit cards to cancel, the methodical work of dismantling a life I'd thought was real, but had turned out to be nothing more than an elaborate performance. Somewhere in Vermont, my wife was probably wrapped in another man's arms, believing she was getting away with something. She had no idea that her pocket dial had just triggered the first domino in a chain reaction that would bring her carefully constructed world crashing down around her ears. I raised my glass to the empty house. No sanctuary for the faithless, I said aloud, borrowing from the name of the wine bar where my marriage had officially ended. Not in this town, and not on my watch. The scotch burned going down, but not as much as the truth. Morning came like a hangover, gray, unwelcome, and full of regret. I woke up on my workshop couch, surrounded by empty bottles and the detritus of a marriage that had faded sometime between midnight and dawn. My phone showed 17 missed calls from Zara and 43 text messages ranging from confused to furious. The first few texts were almost funny. Saw your post? Having fun without me? Then they got progressively more frantic. Aiden, call me back. We need to talk. By 3 a.m., they'd turned ugly. You're being childish. Delete that photo. I made coffee and ignored them all. Instead, I called my bank. Hi, this is Aiden Drayven. I need to remove someone from my joint checking and savings accounts. The process was surprisingly simple when you were the primary account holder and had all the documentation. Within an hour, Zara's access to our money was gone. Not illegal, since my name was on everything, but definitely effective. Next, I called our insurance agent. I need to change the beneficiary on my life insurance policy. Another quick conversation, another bridge burned. By 10 a.m., I was sitting in the office of Margaret Sullivan, Mags to her friends, who worked in HR at Zara's marketing firm. Mags was one of those people who collected information like a squirrel collecting nuts, storing it away for when it might prove useful. She and Zara had never gotten along, which made her the perfect ally for what I had in mind. Aiden, she said, gesturing for me to sit in the chair across from her cluttered desk. This is unexpected. How can I help you? I need to report a potential conflict of interest, I said, keeping my voice professional and calm. My wife may be involved in a business relationship that violates company policy. Mags leaned forward, her eyes lighting up with interest. What kind of business relationship? I pulled out my phone and showed her the screenshots Lyra had shared. Zara and Damien at various business events, the hotel tags, the intimate photos. She's been working with Damien Kessler on partnership deals for his company, but it appears their relationship has become personal. How personal? Personal enough that she's currently in a hotel room with him instead of on the wellness retreat she told everyone about. Mag studied the photos with the intensity of a detective examining crime scene evidence. This is definitely a problem. We have strict policies about personal relationships affecting business decisions. If she's been giving his company preferential treatment, I'm not asking you to fire her, I said. I'm just making sure the company is aware of a potential issue. Of course. Mags made a note in her calendar. I'll need to investigate this properly. It might take a few days. Take all the time you need. I left Mag's office and drove to Terry's garage, where I found him elbow deep in the engine of a 1987 Mustang that had seen better decades. You look like shit, he said without looking up. Thanks. I feel worse. Terry wiped his hands on a greasy rag and studied my face. So what's the plan? You going to confront her when she gets back? No, I'm going to let her confront me. What's that supposed to mean? I pulled out my phone and showed him the bank notifications, the insurance changes, the email confirmations. I've cut off her access to everything. When she tries to use our credit card tonight, it'll be declined. When she checks our bank account, she'll find it empty. Well, empty of her access to it. Jesus, Aiden, that's cold. She's been sleeping with another man for 3 months while pretending to be my loving wife. Cold doesn't begin to cover what she deserves. Terry leaned against the Mustang's fender. What about the photo with Lyra? That was pretty public. That was just the opening move. Lyra thought she was doing me a favor by telling me about Zara's affair, but she didn't realize she was also volunteering to be part of my revenge. You're using her? She used herself. All I did was accept her invitation and make sure the right people saw us together. My phone buzzed with another text from Zara. Aiden, my card was declined. What's going on? I showed the message to Terry, who whistled low. She's figuring it out. Good, let her sweat. I spent the rest of the day at my studio, editing photos and pretending to work while my phone exploded with increasingly frantic messages from my wife. Each text was more desperate than the last, and I savored every one like fine wine. Around 4 p.m., Lyra called. Aiden, we need to talk, she said without preamble. About what? About last night. About that photo. People are talking. Let them talk. You don't understand. Zara called me this morning, screaming. She thinks we're having an affair. Aren't we? Silence on the other end of the line. Then, what? You asked me to dinner. I said yes. You showed me evidence of my wife's infidelity. I thanked you with a photo. Seems pretty straightforward to me. That's not what I meant, and you know it. Do I? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you wanted to break up my marriage so you could have a shot at me. Mission accomplished. Aiden, I never meant for things to go this far. I was just trying to help you see what kind of person Zara really is. And now I do. Just like I see what kind of person you are. I hung up before she could respond. The evening brought more entertainment. Zara's texts had evolved from angry to pleading to threatening. She'd figured out that I'd changed the bank accounts and the insurance, and she was furious. But she still hadn't figured out the best part. At 8 p.m., I got a call from an unknown number. Aiden Drayven? The voice was male, confident, with just a hint of nervousness. Speaking. This is Damien Kessler. I think we need to talk. I smiled. I don't think we do. Look, I know this situation is complicated, but Zara and I are sleeping in a hotel room that I'm probably paying for since her credit cards don't work anymore. Yeah, I'm aware. It's not like that. It's exactly like that. But here's what you don't know, Damien. My wife has been using her position at her company to give your business preferential treatment. That's called a conflict of interest, and it's about to become a very expensive problem for both of you. The silence stretched long enough that I wondered if he'd hung up. You can't prove that, he said finally. I don't have to. HR departments investigate these things very thoroughly once they're reported, and they've already been reported. You snake. Actually, my mother was a saint. But my wife is a whore, and you're welcome to her. Just don't expect her to have a job much longer. I hung up and poured myself a celebration scotch. The next morning brought the call I'd been waiting for. Zara, her voice tight with barely controlled rage. What have you done? Good morning to you too, sweetheart. How's the wellness retreat going? Cut the shit, Aiden. My cards don't work. I can't access our accounts and my boss wants to see me first thing Monday morning. What have you done? I've protected myself and our assets from a spouse who's been committing adultery. Perfectly legal, perfectly reasonable. You can't just freeze me out of our money. Actually, I can. My name is on everything, remember? You insisted on keeping your maiden name, so you never got around to updating the bank paperwork. The sound she made was somewhere between a growl and a sob. This isn't over. You're right, it's not. See you when you get home, dear. I hung up and immediately called Terry. I need you to do me a favor. What kind of favor? The kind that involves Zara's car and a very public place. Aiden, I'm not going to help you commit a crime. No crime, just a little creative parking. An hour later, Terry called back. It's done. Zara's BMW is now parked in the lot behind Damien's apartment complex, right where everyone can see it. I left the keys on the front tire like you asked. Perfect. And the photos? Already posted to the neighborhood Facebook page with a caption asking if anyone knows whose car has been abandoned there for 3 days. I spent the rest of the weekend in my studio working on a new project, a photo series I was calling Perspectives. Each image showed the same location from multiple angles, revealing details that weren't visible from ground level. The metaphor wasn't lost on me. Sunday evening, I got a text from Mags. Investigation starts tomorrow. This is going to be interesting. I replied, Justice usually is. My phone rang immediately. Zara again, but this time she sounded different, smaller, more desperate. Aiden, please, can we talk about this like adults? We could have talked about it like adults 3 months ago before you started sleeping with Damien Kessler. How did you... Never mind. Look, I made a mistake. People make mistakes. People make mistakes. Whores make choices. You chose to betray our marriage, and I chose to protect myself from the consequences. I'm coming home tomorrow. The locks have been changed. You can't lock me out of my own house. It's not your house. It's my house. Your name isn't on the deed, remember? Another one of those little oversights that seemed so unimportant at the time. The silence stretched for so long I thought she'd hung up. Where am I supposed to go? She whispered. I hear Damien has a nice place. Your car's already there. I hung up and turned off my phone. Outside, the rain had started again, drumming against the windows like applause. In the morning, Zara would come home to find herself locked out of her house, her job in jeopardy, and her reputation in ruins. But that was just the beginning. The real show was about to start. Monday morning arrived with the kind of crisp autumn air that made our little Maine town look like a postcard. If you ignored the undercurrent of gossip flowing through the coffee shops and office buildings like an underground river. I was sitting in my studio pretending to work on client photos while actually monitoring the social media feeds of half the town when my phone rang. Terry's name flashed on the screen. You need to see this, he said without preamble. See what? Check the Facebook page for Coastal Maine Business Network. Mags just posted something that's going to make your day. I pulled up the page and found what he was talking about. A professional, carefully worded post about the importance of maintaining ethical boundaries in business relationships, and the company's commitment to investigating all potential conflicts of interest. It didn't mention Zara by name, but in a town this size, it didn't have to. The comments were already rolling in. People who knew Zara, people who worked with her, people who'd seen my photo with Lyra at Sanctuary. The puzzle pieces were clicking together in real time, and the picture they formed wasn't flattering. She's going to lose her shit, Terry observed. She already has. I got 6 voicemails between midnight and 6 a.m., each one more unhinged than the last. You listen to them? I'm saving them. Evidence of harassment in case I need it later. The morning's entertainment was interrupted by a knock on my studio door. I opened it to find Lyra standing on my doorstep, looking like she'd slept about as well as I had. "We need to talk," she said. "I thought we covered everything yesterday." "Aiden, please. This has gotten out of hand." I stepped aside to let her in, mostly because I was curious about what she'd say. She looked around the studio with the appraising eye of someone who made her living evaluating art. "Nice work," she said, nodding toward a series of aerial shots I had mounted on the wall. "Thanks. Now what do you want?" She turned to face me, and I could see the calculation in her green eyes. "I want to make sure we're on the same page about what happened Saturday night." "Which is?" "That it was a mistake, a moment of poor judgment brought on by too much wine and too much gossip." I leaned against my workbench and studied her face. "Is that what you're telling people?" "It's what I'm telling myself." "And what are you telling Zara?" "Nothing. She's not speaking to me." "Smart woman. Took her long enough to figure out what kind of friend you really are?" Lyra's composure cracked slightly. "That's not fair." "Fair? You think any of this is about fair? Your best friend has been lying to everyone for months, including you. She's been using her job to funnel business to her lover, probably violating 6 company policies in the process. And when you found out about it, instead of talking to her, you decided to blow up her marriage for your own entertainment. That's not why I told you, isn't it? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you saw an opportunity to get rid of Zara and take her place, both professionally and personally." The accusation hit home. I could see it in the way her shoulders tensed, the way her eyes darted away from mine. "You don't know what you're talking about," she said. "Don't I? How long have you been after her job at the gallery board? How long have you been waiting for her to screw up badly enough that you could swoop in and save the day? Aiden, and how long have you been wondering what it would be like to sleep with her husband?" The slap came fast and hard, snapping my head to the side and leaving my cheek burning. I touched the spot where her hand had connected and smiled. "There's the real Lyra. The one who's been hiding behind all that cultivated sophistication. You're an asshole. Maybe, but I'm an honest asshole. Can you say the same?" She left without another word, slamming the door hard enough to rattle the windows. I watched through the glass as she stalked to her car, her heels clicking against the pavement like gunshots. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "This is Zara. I'm coming home. We're going to settle this." I typed back, "Doors locked, windows too. Enjoy the front yard." 20 minutes later, I heard a car pull into my driveway. I looked out to see Zara's BMW. Apparently, Terry had left the keys where she could find them, and my soon-to-be ex-wife climbing out of the driver's seat looking like she'd been through a blender. Her usually perfect hair was disheveled, her makeup smeared, and her designer clothes wrinkled. She looked like what she was, a woman whose carefully constructed life had just collapsed around her ears. I opened the window and leaned out. "You look terrible. Let me in, Aiden." "Can't do that. Change the locks, remember? This is my house too." "Actually, it's not. Checked with a lawyer this morning. Since your name isn't on the deed and we're not legally separated yet, I have every right to deny you access to protect myself and my property." She stood in the driveway for a moment, looking lost. Then she seemed to remember something and pulled out her phone. "I'm calling the police." "Go ahead. They'll tell you the same thing the lawyer told me. Until we're officially separated, this is a civil matter." She made the call anyway. I went back to my work, listening to her increasingly frustrated conversation with the dispatcher. 20 minutes later, a patrol car pulled up. I recognized the officer, Detective Mike Rourke, a gruff old-school cop who'd been working this town since before I moved here. He talked to Zara for a few minutes, then knocked on my door. "Aiden," he said when I opened it, "your wife says you've locked her out of her home." "My home," I corrected. "Her name isn't on anything. Deed, mortgage, utilities, all in my name." Rourke sighed. "You know this is going to get messy, right?" "It's already messy. I'm just making sure I don't get buried in the mess she made." "She says you've been harassing her." I pulled out my phone and showed him the call log. 17 calls from her in the last 2 days, 6 voicemails, 43 text messages. Who's harassing who? Rourke looked at the evidence and shook his head. "Like I said, messy. My advice? Get a lawyer and do this properly." "Already did." "Good. And Aiden? Whatever you're planning, make sure it's legal." "Everything I've done has been completely legal." "I'm not talking about what you've done. I'm talking about what you're going to do." After Rourke left, Zara stood in my driveway for another hour, alternately crying and screaming at my windows. A few neighbors came out to watch the show, and I noticed more than one phone recording the spectacle. Finally, she got back in her car and drove away. But not before leaving me one final voicemail. "This isn't over, Aiden. You think you're so smart, but you have no idea what you've started." She was right about one thing. I did think I was smart, and what I'd started was just getting interesting. That evening, I drove to the Coastal Arts Festival, an annual event where the town's cultural elite gathered to pretend they cared about local artists while actually networking and gossiping. I knew Zara would be there. She never missed an opportunity to be seen at important social events. I also knew Lyra would be there since her gallery was one of the main sponsors. What I hadn't expected was to see them together, standing near the main display, having what looked like an intense conversation. I parked across the street and watched through my telephoto lens as they gestured and argued, their body language telling a story their words couldn't hide. Then I saw something interesting. Damien Kessler, walking toward them with the confident stride of a man who thought he owned the world. The three of them formed a triangle of tension that was visible even from a distance. I grabbed my camera and started shooting. The photos told a story. Zara gesturing angrily at Lyra, Damien trying to play peacemaker, Lyra looking like she wanted to be anywhere else. Then Zara turned on Damien, jabbing her finger at his chest while he held up his hands in surrender. The final shot was perfect, all three of them in frame, their faces showing the strain of secrets that were no longer secret, alliances that had crumbled, and lies that had finally caught up with them. I posted the photos to social media with a simple caption. Some festivals celebrate art, others celebrate drama. Within an hour, the post had 50 likes and 20 comments, most of them from people who recognized the players in the drama. The gossip mill was running at full speed now, and there was no stopping it. My phone rang. Zara's number. "You snake," she said without preamble. "You're stalking us now?" "I was photographing a public event. You just happened to be part of the scenery." "Delete those photos." "Can't do that. They're already viral." The silence stretched long enough that I wondered if she'd thrown her phone against a wall. "What do you want?" she asked finally. "I want you to understand that actions have consequences. You chose to betray our marriage. I'm choosing to let everyone see who you really are. This isn't just about me anymore. You're hurting Lyra too. Lyra made her own choices, just like you did. And Damien? Damien's a big boy. He knew you were married when he started sleeping with you. He can handle a little public embarrassment. You're destroying people's lives. I'm revealing the truth. If that destroys your lives, maybe you should have thought about that before you started living lies." I hung up and poured myself a scotch. Outside, the wind was picking up, rattling the windows and promising another storm. But inside my studio, surrounded by the evidence of my wife's betrayal and the tools of my revenge, I felt calmer than I had in months. The festival photos were just the beginning. Tomorrow, the real fun would start. Tuesday morning brought news that made my coffee taste like victory. Mags called at 8 a.m. with an update that had me grinning before I was fully awake. "She's been suspended," Mags said without preamble. "Pending investigation." "How suspended?" "No access to the building, no company email, no contact with clients. We found evidence that she'd been steering contracts to Kessler's company without proper competitive bidding. That's a firing offense, possibly even legal action." I sat up in bed, suddenly very awake. Legal action. If we can prove she took kickbacks or other compensation, yeah, the company takes this stuff seriously. What kind of compensation are we talking about? Hotel rooms, expensive dinners, jewelry. We found credit card receipts going back 3 months, all paid for by Kessler's company, all during periods when she was supposed to be working on their contracts. I whistled low. That's not just an affair. That's prostitution with extra steps. Don't say that where anyone can hear you, Mags warned, but you're not wrong. After hanging up, I made myself breakfast and planned the day's entertainment. Zara would be getting the news about her suspension soon, if she hadn't already. Damien would be dealing with questions from his own company about why he'd been paying for his business partner's personal expenses, and Lyra would be trying to distance herself from both of them before their scandal contaminated her reputation. It was going to be a beautiful day. My first stop was Terry's garage, where I found him working on a vintage Camaro that looked like it had been through a war. "You're in a good mood," he observed, looking up from the engine. "Zara got suspended this morning, pending investigation for ethics violations." Terry wiped his hands on a rag and grinned. "No shit? That was fast. Turns out when you give HR a roadmap to someone's misconduct, they follow it pretty efficiently." "So what's next?" I pulled out my phone and showed him a text I'd received an hour earlier from an unknown number. "We need to talk. Meet me at the harbor parking garage, top level, noon. Come alone. D." "Damien wants to have a conversation," I explained. "That sounds like a bad idea." "Probably, but I'm curious what he has to say." "You want backup?" "Nah. If he was going to do something stupid, he wouldn't give me advance warning." The harbor parking garage was a 5-story concrete monument to poor city planning, built in the 1970s and showing its age. The top level was mostly empty except for a few cars belonging to people who worked in the nearby office buildings. Damien was waiting by the guardrail, looking out at the gray water of the harbor. He'd traded his usual expensive suit for jeans and a sweater, but he still carried himself with the arrogance of a man who'd never had to face real consequences for his actions. "Aiden," he said without turning around. "Thanks for coming." "Wouldn't miss it. What's on your mind, Damien?" He turned to face me, and I could see the strain in his eyes. This has to stop. What has to stop? The harassment, the social media posts, the investigation at Zara's company. I leaned against a concrete pillar and smiled. I'm not harassing anyone. I'm just living my life and sharing my experiences. You're destroying people. People are destroying themselves. I'm just documenting the process. Damien took a step closer, and I could see the anger building in his face. "You think this is funny? I think it's justice." "Justice? You're ruining Zara's career over a personal matter." "Personal matter?" I laughed. "She used her position at her company to funnel business to you while you were sleeping with her. That's not personal, that's professional misconduct." "It wasn't like that." "What was it like? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you were paying for closeness with company contracts." That's when he snapped. Damien lunged at me with a wild swing that telegraphed itself from a mile away. I sidestepped easily, letting his momentum carry him past me toward the concrete wall. "Careful there, champ," I said, as he caught himself. "Wouldn't want you to hurt yourself." He spun around, his face red with rage and embarrassment. "You snake." "You know, everyone keeps saying that, but my mother was actually a very nice woman, unlike your business partner, who's apparently for sale to the highest bidder." He came at me again, this time with more control, but still broadcasting his intentions like a neon sign. I grabbed his wrist as he swung, twisted slightly, and used his own force to send him stumbling backward into his precious BMW. The impact left a dent in the driver's side door, and Damien sitting on the pavement, looking dazed. "Whoops," I said, pulling out my phone to take a picture. "That's going to cost you." "You're insane," he gasped, struggling to his feet. "I'm practical. You wanted to solve this with violence, but you're not very good at violence. I wanted to solve this with consequences, and I'm very good at consequences." I walked away, leaving him standing next to his damaged car, and drove straight to the police station to file a report for assault. Detective Rourke took my statement with the weary expression of a man who'd seen too much human stupidity to be surprised by anything. "He took a swing at you?" Rourke asked. "2 swings. I've got the bruised knuckles from deflecting them, and his car has a nice dent where he hit it after missing me. You want to press charges? I want it documented. If he tries anything else, I want a paper trail showing he's the aggressor." "Smart thinking. You got any witnesses?" I pulled out my phone and showed him the parking garage's security cameras. "Building's got full coverage, should be on video." Rourke made notes in his report. "Anything else I should know about this situation?" "Just that it's probably going to get worse before it gets better. It always does." That evening, I decided to treat myself to dinner at Sanctuary. Not because I particularly enjoyed the pretentious atmosphere, but because I knew it was where Zara's social circle liked to gather, and I wanted to see how they were handling the latest developments. I wasn't disappointed. The wine bar was buzzing with conversation, and I caught fragments of gossip as I made my way to a corner table. Suspended from her job. Saw the photos from the festival. Always knew there was something off about her. I ordered a scotch and settled in to enjoy the show. Within minutes, I spotted 3 of Zara's former friends huddled around a table near the bar, their voices low but their body language animated. They kept glancing toward the door like they were expecting someone. That someone turned out to be Lyra, who walked in looking like she'd rather be anywhere else. She spotted Zara's friends and hesitated, clearly debating whether to approach them or run. The decision was made for her when one of them, Jennifer, I think her name was, waved her over with the enthusiasm of a shark. I couldn't hear the conversation from where I was sitting, but I could read the body language. Jennifer and the others were probing for information, looking for details about the scandal that was consuming their social circle. Lyra was trying to deflect, but she was outnumbered and outmaneuvered. Then Jennifer said something that made Lyra's face go white. Whatever it was, it hit home hard enough that Lyra stood up abruptly and headed for the door. She didn't make it. Halfway across the room, she stopped and turned back toward the table where Jennifer was sitting. The conversation that followed was brief but intense, ending with Lyra storming out and Jennifer looking satisfied with whatever damage she'd inflicted. I finished my scotch and followed Lyra outside, catching up with her in the parking lot. "Rough night?" I asked. She spun around, her eyes blazing with anger and something that might have been fear. "What do you want?" "Just checking on an old friend." "We're not friends." "We were never friends." "No, but we were allies, briefly." "That was a mistake." "For who? You or me?" She looked around the parking lot like she was checking for witnesses, then stepped closer. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" "I've exposed the truth. Seems like a public service to me." "The truth?" "The truth is that you've destroyed 3 people's lives because your ego couldn't handle being cheated on." "My ego?" "This isn't about my ego. This is about consequences. Actions have consequences, and you're all finally facing yours." "What consequences am I facing?" "I didn't do anything wrong." I smiled. "Didn't you?" "Because from what I hear, you've been playing all sides of this game from the beginning. Feeding information to me about Zara, feeding information to Zara about me, probably feeding information to Damien about both of us. That's not... And now that everything's falling apart, Your friends are starting to wonder what your real role was in all this, starting to ask questions about your motives. The fear in her eyes confirmed that I'd hit the target. What did Jennifer say to you in there? I asked. Something about how convenient it was that you were the one who told me about Zara's affair? Something about how you've been positioning yourself to take over Zara's spot on the gallery board? You don't know what you're talking about. I know that small towns have long memories and sharp tongues, and I know that your reputation is built on trust and discretion. How's that working out for you now? She turned and walked away without another word, but I could see the defeat in her shoulders. The predator had become the prey, and she knew it. I drove home through streets that felt different now, charged with the electricity of scandal and gossip. In my rearview mirror, I could see storm clouds gathering over the harbor, promising rain and wind, and the kind of weather that made people stay indoors and think about their choices. But I wasn't done making choices for them. Tomorrow would bring new opportunities, new pressures, new consequences for the people who'd thought they could lie and cheat and betray without paying a price. The real storm was just getting started. Wednesday arrived with the kind of brutal weather that made Maine famous, driving rain, howling wind, and the sort of gray sky that pressed down on you like a lead blanket. Perfect weather for what I had planned. I spent the morning in my studio, putting the finishing touches on a project I'd been working on for the past 3 days. Using my drone footage and some creative editing, I'd created a presentation that told the complete story of Zara and Damien's affair, from their first meeting at a business conference to their most recent hotel rendezvous. The beauty of it was that everything was true and legally obtained. Hotel receipts that Mags had found during her investigation, social media posts that Lyra had screenshotted, photos I'd taken at public events, text messages that Zara had sent to mutual friends, not knowing they'd forward them to me. It was a masterpiece of public humiliation, set to music and edited with the skill of someone who'd spent 15 years making commercial videos, the kind of thing that would go viral in a town this size within hours of being released. But first, I needed the right venue. I called Lyra's gallery and asked to speak with her assistant, a nervous young woman named Beth, who always sounded like she was afraid of saying the wrong thing. "Hi, Beth. This is Aiden Drayven. I'd like to rent the gallery for a private event tonight." "Tonight? Oh, I don't think we have anything available on such short notice. It's for a memorial service. My grandmother passed away unexpectedly, and she always loved the gallery. I'd be willing to pay premium rates." The lie came easily, and Beth's sympathy was immediate. "Oh, I'm so sorry for your loss. Let me check with Lyra." 5 minutes later, she called back. "Lyra says the gallery is yours for tonight, 7 to 10 p.m., and she's waiving the rental fee as a gesture of sympathy." Perfect. Lyra's guilt was making her predictable. Next, I called everyone I could think of who might want to attend a memorial service for my fictional grandmother. Zara's former colleagues, people from the business community, social media influencers, local reporters. I told each of them that it would be a celebration of a woman who'd valued truth and honesty above all else. By 6 p.m., I was at the gallery setting up my equipment. The space was perfect, high ceilings, excellent acoustics, and a projection system that could display my presentation on a wall-sized screen. I tested everything twice, then went to change into my best suit. The guests started arriving at 7 sharp, and I greeted each one with the solemn dignity appropriate for a memorial service. Most of them had never met my grandmother, who was actually still alive and living in Florida, but they offered their condolences with the practiced sympathy of people who attended a lot of social events. Zara arrived at 7:30, looking like she'd spent the day in hell. Her suspension from work had become common knowledge, and the stress was showing in her face, her posture, her carefully maintained facade of composure. She approached me with the cautious steps of someone walking through a minefield. "Aiden," she said quietly, "I'm sorry for your loss." "Thank you. Grandmother always said that truth was the most important thing in life. She'd be pleased to see so many people here to honor that principle." Something in my tone made her eyes narrow, but before she could respond, Damien walked in. He looked even worse than Zara. His usually perfect hair was disheveled, his expensive clothes wrinkled, and there was a haunted quality to his eyes that suggested he hadn't been sleeping well. Lyra was the last to arrive, slipping in just before 8 with the nervous energy of someone who knew they were walking into a trap but couldn't figure out how to avoid it. "Ladies and gentlemen," I said, moving to the front of the room and tapping my wine glass with a fork. "Thank you all for coming tonight to honor the memory of someone who meant a great deal to me." The room fell quiet, faces turning toward me with the respectful attention appropriate for a eulogy. My grandmother always taught me that the truth has a way of coming to light, no matter how deeply people try to bury it. She believed that lies were like cancer. They might stay hidden for a while, but eventually they spread and destroy everything they touch. I gestured toward the projection screen, which flickered to life with a title card. "The Truth About Trust, a Modern Morality Tale." In her honor, I'd like to share a story about truth and consequences, about what happens when people choose deception over honesty, betrayal over loyalty. The first image appeared on the screen, Zara and Damien at a business conference looking professional and appropriate. Nothing scandalous, just two people in a work setting. This story begins with what appeared to be a simple business relationship, I continued, my voice carrying clearly through the gallery's acoustics. A partnership between a marketing professional and a tech entrepreneur. The images progressed chronologically, more business meetings, gradually becoming more personal. Damien's hand on Zara's shoulder, Zara laughing at something he'd said, the body language of two people who were becoming more than colleagues. I could hear murmurs from the audience, could see recognition dawning on faces as people realized what they were watching. But as my grandmother always said, the truth has many layers. What appears to be one thing on the surface often turns out to be something very different underneath. The hotel receipts appeared on screen, followed by restaurant bills, jewelry purchases, expensive gifts, all paid for by Damien's company during periods when Zara was supposed to be evaluating contracts objectively. The question becomes, where does business end and corruption begin? When does a professional relationship cross the line into something else entirely? Zara stood up abruptly. "Stop this," she said, her voice cutting through the murmur of conversation. "This is inappropriate." "Is it?" I asked mildly. "I thought we were celebrating honesty. Isn't this honest?" "This is harassment. This is public information," I interrupted. "Hotel receipts obtained through a legitimate HR investigation, social media posts that you made public, photos taken at public events. Nothing here was obtained illegally or unethically." Damien was on his feet now too, his face red with anger and embarrassment. "You can't do this." "Actually, I can. This is a private event on private property, and everyone here came voluntarily." The presentation continued, each slide more damning than the last. Text messages between Zara and Damien discussing which contracts to steer toward his company. Photos of them in compromising positions at hotels across New England. Financial records showing the correlation between their personal relationship and his company's business success. "The real tragedy," I said as the final slides appeared, "is that this betrayal didn't just hurt one person. It hurt everyone who trusted these individuals to act with integrity. Colleagues who believed in fair competition. Friends who thought they were dealing with honest people. A spouse who thought he was in a faithful marriage." Zara was crying now, tears streaming down her face as she stood frozen in the middle of the gallery. Around her, people were whispering, pointing, taking photos with their phones. "You snake!" Damien snarled, lunging toward me. But this time I was ready. I sidestepped his clumsy attack and let him crash into the projection equipment. The screen went dark, but the damage was already done. Everyone in the room had seen everything they needed to see. "Security!" I called out, though there was no security. The bluff worked. Damien backed off, realizing that his attack had been witnessed by 50 people with cameras. "This isn't over," he said, but his voice lacked conviction. "Yes, it is," I replied. "It's been over since the moment you decided to betray people who trusted you." The crowd was already dispersing, people filing out of the gallery with the satisfied buzz of spectators who'd witnessed a spectacular downfall. I could hear fragments of conversation. "Did you see her face when—" "I always suspected. This is going to be all over town by morning." Lyra approached me as the last of the guests left. Her face was pale, her composure finally cracking. "Why?" she asked. "Why did you do this to them?" "I didn't do this to them. They did it to themselves. I just made sure everyone could see what they'd done." "And what about me? What did I do to deserve being dragged into this?" I studied her face, seeing the fear and desperation she was trying to hide. "You made a choice, Lyra. You chose to betray your best friend's confidence to serve your own interests. You chose to try to manipulate me for your own gain. You chose to play games with people's lives." "I was trying to help you." "No, you were trying to help yourself, and now you get to live with the consequences." She turned and walked away, her heels clicking against the gallery floor like a countdown timer. I was alone in the gallery now, surrounded by the detritus of my revenge. Wine glasses and cocktail napkins, the scattered pieces of what had once been respectable lives. Outside, the storm was reaching its peak, rain lashing against the windows and wind howling through the streets. But inside, everything was calm. The truth had been told, the consequences delivered, the scales balanced. My phone buzzed with a text from Terry. "Saw the video someone posted online. Holy shit, man. You really did it." I typed back, "Justice served." "What happens now?" I looked around the empty gallery, at the dark projection screen, at the evidence of a plan executed flawlessly. Now they live with what they've done, and I live with what I've done. The difference is, I can sleep at night. I turned off the lights and walked out into the storm, leaving the gallery dark and empty behind me. Tomorrow the whole town would be talking about what had happened here tonight. Zara's career would be over, her reputation destroyed. Damien would face questions from his own company, his marriage, his business partners. Lyra would have to explain to everyone how she'd been involved in the whole sordid affair. But tonight, walking through the rain toward my car, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months. Peace. The rain washed over me like absolution, and for the first time since that pocket dial had shattered my illusions, I smiled without calculation or malice. The gallery doors slammed shut behind me, echoes of their disgrace bouncing off the high arches. No sanctuary for the faithless, not in this town, and not on my watch.